Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today we're going to return to the world of the Law of One and some really powerful channelings by Quo. I've had 2 episodes on Quo. Quo is a Confederation channel that is used by Jim McCarty and Carla Ruckert, who were both involved in the Law of One sessions. For a better understanding of the Law of One sessions, check out my previous episodes. The Law of One was a channeling in 1981 through 1984, where a group of people, 3 people, were able to channel what appeared to be a higher dimensional being that was a very important part of our solar system and had guided us through the history of the Earth and the way that the soul reincarnates on the earth and what our purpose is in this creation, and the basic idea that we are all one. This is often referred to as the raw material. Ra was who they channeled. Some of that information is very hard to understand, and there is another Confederation member. Ra appears to be a member of some sort of Galactic Confederation when they're channeling it, and Quo is another one who I guess is a part of Ra, or Ra is a part of Quo, but they are able to channel Quo, and Quo is a little easier to understand and very powerful and poignant in many of the teachings. Most of the time, Quo is being originally channeled by Carla, but also is being channeled by Jim McCarty in different parts. So Quo is able to jump around to different people and channel different people in these sessions. The thing that I'm very interested in is the idea of polarities. A picture is painted in the Law of One material that we either choose to serve ourselves or serve others. And this is the primary question that we're answering for our own incarnations on this path, on this earth. And once we actually decide, hey, I want to help others, or you choose to just help yourself, dominate, control, kill, and whatever you can imagine to anyone else, for as you're concerned, no one else matters but yourself. And these are actually incredible movements in the universe, and there are entire groups that are dedicated to the service to self and service to others. In the sessions, a negative entity in service to self attacks the session, and they have to protect Carla, and they have to go through some different protection techniques and some rituals to protect Carla, and it appears to be scary and kind of dangerous. There's these negative entities that are involved, which go all the way back to when you were in Sunday school and they told you about demons and all of those ideas where they say, if you're listening to channeling, those are just demons and evil spirits. So there are several channelings where they ask Quo about these negative entities and also discuss the differences between service to self and others that really relate to what's going on now in our world. Even though they were channeled in the past, they absolutely apply to what's going on now. And so I collected up a couple of ones that I think that you'd really like, that one that's talking about Orion, one that's talking about conspiracy theories, and one that's talking about riots and fighting and how to block these negative entities. And some of it's unrelated. It's hard for me to come up with a single topic when I do some of these Quo readings, but you'll see through all of this, there is a single idea, and it's really talking about these polarities. And one of the most important observations is all of these negative entities, the evil that you see out there, is yourself. It's a big revelation in the Law of One, and that revelation gives you power over those other entities, and then it just becomes a little bit different than what you think. But I want to get as much information about this. Obviously, I don't want to be attacked by negative entities, and what do I want to do? I've discussed different rituals and Q&As and on different episodes. They use a ritual called the LBRP at the beginning of the Law of One sessions, which is a classic ritual used in white magic, in the Golden Dawn and other groups, even black magic in different ways. where you take a circle and you cleanse it by calling upon higher entities. And it's very powerful, and I recommend doing that anyway. It's a good way to clear negative entities. There's obviously a lot of ways to clear negative entities, but the biggest understanding is that they are you. The negative entity is you. And if you find love for them, you will always have a better situation when you understand how it works. So in the first session I wanted to read was given in September of 2017. And they ask, "We have been told this is a time of harvest for Earth, and that those few desiring a service to self-harvest should not be denied the opportunity to achieve their choice. As a person who prefers the service to others' choice, what encouragements or thoughts can you offer concerning my reactions to, and especially my thinking about, the fighting and riots in some of our cities? I don't want to be angry. I don't want to hurt others with what I say. How can I remain focused on what is positive when some events seem to go absolutely contrary to what I believe? I am Quo, and greet each of you in love and in light this afternoon. It is a great joy and privilege for us to blend our energies with your own, as you are such beautiful and brilliant sources of light and love this day, and for the entire time during which you have shared your experiences this weekend and throughout your lives. Indeed, you are those spoken of in the song just heard as tuning for this session. Each of you have wandered far, not only in this life, as you move about in service to others, but in many previous lives on many other planets, such as this one, those planetary beings which have called for your assistance to aid in the harvest of souls as is occurring now upon planet Earth. We have observed your planet for a great portion of what you would call time, for this harvest is one which a great number of angelic forces have been observing with hopefulness and steadfast concern for many of your years. For you see that many of the seekers of truth upon your planet have yet to awaken to the fact that they are those who are here to move forward in the evolution of their minds, their bodies, and their spirits. The journey of what you call seeking the truth of unity of all things, the truth of light that has made all things, the truth of love that permeates all things and all entities. We are ever hopeful that those who have long slept upon this planetary surface may gently awaken to the knowledge that there is a greater purpose to their knowledge of life, pursuit of its fruits, and elevation of their goals, shall we say, in this life experience. The question put forth today for us to consider is how those entities who have oriented themselves in service to others may look upon the harvest of those who have oriented themselves towards service to self. For all now have the opportunity to move forward in their evolution as the transition into the density of love and understanding is underway upon your planet. Indeed, this process has been ongoing for some of what you would call time and shall continue for what we perceive to be an unknown amount of time into your future. Unknown, we say, for there is great confusion among many upon your planet's surface at this time. Confusion as to what is the nature of reality. What is their place in the overall picture of the creation in which they find themselves moving about in somewhat random and difficult patterns of expression. We are aware that many of you here are desirous of being in service in whatever way you can, and perhaps may entertain some doubt or hesitation in regards to those entities who have chosen another path from your own. They have chosen, shall we say, a darker, more restricted expression of the infinite love and light of the one Creator. The query for today requests information concerning what we regard as one of the more difficult nodal points of the creation as it is currently unfolding, which is to say the differentiation of pathways to the Creator that we have called the pathway of the service to self and the pathway of the service to others. Now, these pathways have long been understood upon your planet as distinct and have gone by different designations. You have the distinction, for example, between good and evil. You have the distinction, for example, between the way of love and the way of hate, the way of hope and the way of fear. And we could go on, indicating differences that the two pathways represent, and signals, shall we say, by means of which their difference can be registered. We would like to say, however, that there is, with regard to what constitutes the negative pathway of seeking, and the positive or service to others pathway of seeking, a great deal of confusion. And it is not necessarily the case that activities that seem negative to you and that, in fact, we would even say possess a modicum of negativity to them are indicators of an underlying polarity that is indeed service to self. So we would begin by addressing some of the factors that play into the choice between service to others and service to self as a means of clarifying what we have to offer with regard to the attitude that might profitably be taken up on the part of those seeking service to others in relation to those clearly polarizing service to self. Now, it has been pointed out that there is upon your planet now a good deal of manifestation of what we might call chaotic energies. And sometimes, in fact, all too frequently, these chaotic energies find expression at the negative end of the emotional register. At this negative end, you find fear, you find anger, you find hatred, you find misunderstandings that tend to get expressed in terms of various modes of prejudice. Now, when these emotions, which can be stored up in the mind-body-spirit complexes, not only of individuals but of groups, you often get violent outbursts that create hostile situations and tend to provoke, on the other side, hostile responses. And it is almost impossible for citizens of your planet to avoid identifying with one side or another of many a conflict that arises to public attention. There is that side which is regarded as the evil. There is that side which is regarded as the good. Now, in some cases, we would not deny that there is a larger portion of negativity on one side than another, but that is not where we would like to place our thought at this time. For we would begin with the observation that the mere fact that an individual or group finds the need to express itself in negative terms, in hostile terms, or even in violent terms, does not necessarily indicate an underlying commitment to the negative polarity. As we have suggested, in fact, there is on your planet so much confusion that for the most part it is extremely difficult to ascertain even where the primary propensity lies in many cases. So it is most definitely premature to judge an individual as one who is polarizing on the path of service to self on the basis of certain manifest actions, which are redolent, shall we say, of that polarity without necessarily having embraced it full and complete. So let us say this: there are indeed emotions, and anger perhaps is amongst the most prominent among them, that if reinforced, if embraced, if built upon, if made the focus and the pivot of a commitment, can in the fullness of time lead to a polarization toward the negative that is of a harvestable quality. However, we would point out that anger in its random expressions, anger as hostility, as you suggest in demonstrations, you do not have the kind of focused service to self-development that even remotely approaches harvestable quality. In fact, outbursts of this kind tend to characterize individuals who in the root choice have already tended towards service to others, but are having difficulty in manifesting that choice in a consistent fashion, in a fashion that reaches down to the root of their being. By contrast, an entity who is approaching harvestable quality on the negative path typically will not be noticed as one who is extraordinarily negative he or she will most generally be taken as one who is, in fact, positive, because it is a characteristic of this path that the measure of success is indexed to the ability to control, to manipulate, to dominate others. And the surest way to spoil the business, shall we say, in that enterprise is to let the cat out of the bag with regard to who you really are. It is very much to your advantage if you can generate a public persona that seems positive, so that those energies you wish to commandeer to your own will gladly serve you, thinking that they are in fact serving one of a positive polarity. So while it is true that the attainment of the kind of focused service to self orientation very often does begin by working on negative emotions, by honoring the fine edge of hate, so to speak, it is not generally a manifest phenomenon that these emotions in their expression are associated with the individuals in question. Having said that, we will say that there are such individuals, and having said that, we will say that the presence of such individuals in a planet which is attempting to achieve harvestable quality of being into fourth density does constitute a real challenge, and is an element in the confusion generally observed in your social energy complex at this time. In fact, we would go one step further and say it is a rather significant element in that confusion. What makes it particularly difficult is that it is not always clear. In fact, ultimately, it is never clear to any other entity what the underlying polarity of its fellow citizens might be. And it is very easy, therefore, to deceive others with regards to one's intentions, and it is very easy to make a presentation of oneself such that others are drawn into the orbit of the service to self, or ipsissimus adept, who seeks harvestable quality of its being on the negative path. The conundrum facing service to others entities in simply acknowledging that the social energy complex is permeated with negative elements that can be difficult to track down to their source is that one cannot be certain with regard to many an entity that one is in fact dealing with an entity resolutely in opposition to service to others, and one does not wish to close a door if there is some reasonable expectation, or even, shall we say, unreasonable expectation, that another self who seems to be veering towards the negative could in fact be merely dealing with energies that will eventually, and perhaps even soon, be resolved in such a way that a clearer orientation to service to others could indeed emerge within that soul. So what is a poor entity to do? How are you to address the realization that many of the social movements you face do indeed seem to be shot through the elements lending towards service to self, and that these elements do indeed seem to be exercising a kind of magnetic draw towards many of your fellow citizens? What are you to do in striking a posture that expresses a clear orientation towards serving others, while at the same time recognizing that these negative elements are abroad in the land, and that those who are supporting and sustaining these negative elements do have a right to their choices of path? The operative consideration here is that of freedom of the will, and we would call your attention to the fact that it is a characteristic of those who wish to serve primarily their other selves, and who are willing to bend every effort in order to achieve a clear orientation in that service, that the primary value they embrace is a recognition of the centrality of the freedom of the other self you wish to serve. To serve another self merely in the way you think other selves need to be served is, after all, merely a surreptitious way of serving yourself. And so, the first impediment to service to others is always the fact that others are, in fact, different than oneself, diverse in many respects, and a good many of them unobserved, so that one must tread very lightly and give ground whenever one can, so as not to interfere with the process of development of one's fellows. Now, a situation of great confusion inevitably arises when one makes every effort to give this kind of ground, only to discover that every inch one gives is taken, and more is constantly demanded up to the point that one's own free will is being infringed. At some point, it does become necessary to find a way to step back from such engagements, and it can be the case that when the prospect of being dominated by a resolute seeker of the self is imminent, that one might need to act rather precipitously, to act in a way that can even seem on its face to be violent. And in that violence, of course, we will confess there is negativity. Now, this is not news to those of you who have dwelled upon this planet in third density for some time. In fact, we will say something further. It is also a trait. It is also what we would even call a crisis in the creation that bleeds through into fourth density, even into fifth density, and we will say even into the early part of sixth density. Now, as those of Ra have suggested, in the sixth density, the polarities are in fact unified, so that there is no longer the need at that point to polarize by making a choice of the one or the other. So it is tempting to say, well, since that is indeed the goal that all evolving souls are directed towards, why do we not simply now take that result as a conclusion and begin to operate as if indeed the two polarities are in fact already unified? We would say to you that our answer to this question is going to seem like a somewhat disharmonic one, even though we as corporate entity that we are, combining fourth density, Hatan, fifth density, Latwii, sixth density, Ra, attempt to harmonize our voices as best we can in the form of a single response upon this question. We would have to say, however, Ra, the polarities are harmonized. Latwii, the polarities are in the process of being harmonized. Hatan, the polarities are still in opposition to one another. Sadly, sadly, sadly. As we have to say all of these three things at once. We have to say that indeed the polarities are such that they mix no better than oil and water, and that the service to self greeting to service to others can but be rejected, and when it becomes too insistent, must be rejected absolutely. For otherwise it would undermine the viability of the free will, which is the very essence of the seeking process that all must enjoy upon the path of service to others. We find also that those who have chosen the path of service to self and have achieved harvestable quality in pursuing that path are not, shall we say, stupid. They recognize very well what the dynamics are that they are dealing with, and so there is no means by which a service to others entity can talk them out of their position or show them the error of their ways. We may offer them love and light, but it is safe to do so chiefly behind a strong curtain of protective light. A curtain of protective light, we would add, which is always available to you to invoke. It is your birthright as an incarnate soul to have access to this curtain of light, which is often made use by those in a positive orientation when faced with a psychic attack. You cannot talk an ipsissimus out of the polarity that has been deeply and fundamentally chosen and honed over long years of development. You can seek to coexist as best you can. There have come times when groups oppositely polarized have come to blows. It is not a characteristic of the positive polarity to initiate these blows or to act preemptively, but it is a characteristic from time to time when necessary to preserve the integrity of the seeking process in free will, to act defensively, and it remains rather strong instinct within third density, lasting well into fourth, to act protectively for others who may be seen to be vulnerable to the intrusions of service to self. We as are not in a position to attempt to dissuade you from the defensive action. We as will say you do have resources that you rarely draw upon, that you can call upon to come to your aid. And when you do so, you can obviate the need in many cases for more overt hostile encounters. However, even that resource will sometimes fail, and it does prove to be true that when push comes to shove, shove must push back. Sadly, 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 we say. So we cannot tell you that you should not circle the wagons in a defensive gesture, when such a defense is necessary to preserve the integrity of the seeking of individuals, the seeking of positively oriented groups. But we will say that within many a positively oriented group, there will be the expression of negative emotions that can seem like they come from a service to self place, but in reality at the bottom do not. So even within circled wagons, you will find apparent hostility, and we ask that you consider carefully whether these negative expressions of anger, hostility, prejudice, ill feeling, could not after all be healed, could not after all be offered the love which it is your best and highest gift to be able to offer. On the subject of negative entities, a question is asked in a channeling in 1992. They ask Quo, whose channeling is being done by Carla. The question this afternoon has to deal with the phenomenon of the visitation of a third density human being by a negatively oriented entity or energy that is sent from another third density human being practicing what is usually called the black magical arts. We are wondering how the person receiving this energy, or another wishing to help this person receive this negative energy, should deal with it. What is the best attitude, the best actions, and the best principles that need to be considered when dealing with negatively oriented visitations, whether of an entity or an energy? I am Quo. We are honored to have the privilege of being called to your group to speak of negative entities among your own people, and to speak also of those non-physical principles and entities which may be called upon by those within your density who are polarizing upon the path of service to self or negativity. Let us first define the term black arts or black magical art. The metaphysical both of the service to others path and the service to self path is that which takes place upon a field which appears to be dark. The background of metaphysical work for both polarities is a metaphysical environment of darkness, for the metaphysical consciousness of the living spirit within third density illusion is hidden within the deep and unlit roots of the mind. Consequently, both those who seek the darkness and those who seek the light begin in a common ground of darkness, the darkness of that which is not known. Upon this level of seeking for energy or power, the search for truth is conducted in night conditions. The moon's dimmest light is the brightest illumination. As one seeks spiritually, it is extremely subtle and difficult work to distinguish truth from non-truth or outright falsity, to distinguish the positive leaning towards the love of the Infinite One in service to others from the same activity which may seek service to self. Many are those metaphysical seekers who expect that the seeking towards the positive truth will be done in noonday sun, metaphysically speaking. This is untrue. The metaphysical search is not clear, obvious, or simple. Each of you here who listens to this voice speaking our thoughts knows of the case of mistaking apparent truth for truth, and can recall instances in which that which one thought one had discovered to be a shining light was instead relatively valueless and not filled with light or power. In the dim moonlight, shadows can be deceiving. The metaphysical search, then, is one in which faith is the great illuminator. That faith which cannot be given by one to another, that faith which each gestates within the spiritual part of the mind and body, so that there becomes a faith which is personal, founded by the self. Now we return to a view of how to deal with negative entities. As a positively polarized person living a life in faith, one is prone to feel safe in the arms of the good, the true, and the beautiful. However, the entity upon the negative path feels that there is no safety, feels there is no haven, feels that it and only it shall be the one to be counted upon, relied upon. Therefore, this entity wishes to build personal power with a greater initial reason an impetus for building a magical personality. Furthermore, this magical personality is simpler to build than the positively oriented magical personality. The negative entity need only attempt to give to the cell all possible power of any kind whatsoever without the need for discrimination or judgment. The positively polarized entity instead is moving through processes of balancing, the seemingly opposite of all things, to ascertain the most careful balance of truth, of beauty, of goodness. For to the positively oriented entity, it is clear that the illusion has the appearance of a bias toward negative events and circumstances. In order to clarify right action and the positive use of power, careful balancing of all stimulus needs must be done. Thus, each of you has the seemingly more difficult task in living a chosen life of faith, for both paths are given by the one infinite Creator. Although the Creator offers suggestions implicit in experience that the positive path of serving others is preferable and more to be desired, the negative path beckons, and it too is, as this instrument would say, godly, in that there is no energy but that of the one infinite Creator. Further, the form of your experience in third density offers simpler beginnings to a metaphysical base of power for those which choose negativity. What is not obvious is that the negative path becomes more and more difficult until last it is a road impossible to be walked, whereas the positive path is eternal. Therefore, one who is assaulted by word, dream, feeling, or other action by a negatively polarized entity of third density is dealing with not only a godly person, but his own self. For all are one in the creation of the Father. In each mind, body, and spirit, which together make up the person, there is all that there is. Each person is a holograph of the creation, and the Creator. Thusly, when negative greeting is known or suspected, the positively oriented person of power sits down and prepares itself to reckon with its own universal nature. It is fully capable and fully supplied with negativity. The perceived negativity from the outside in is successful when the positively oriented intended victim knows not that it is being greeted by its very self. If a ravening beast comes at one's body, one attempts to slay the beast to save the self. If a metaphysical ravening beast attacks one in the manner of magical arts, one reckons with this attack by visualizing this creature, welcoming it into the self, and accepting fully that this horrible monster is a part of the self. When one chooses a path, one has the full spectrum from which to choose, precisely because one contains all that there is. The first defense, therefore, is to visualize this negative power and fearlessly to invite it to take up a loving absorption within the very heart, for positive power is power balanced by knowledge of the self. The decision not to attempt power over another is made when the entity grasps that there is no need to have power over others, for all of creation expresses its power in the self. All magical work, therefore, is done upon the self. There is no need to manipulate, teach, control, move, or advise other entities. The need is only to do these things within the self, disciplining the self to a more and more balanced and clear acceptance of the universal nature of selfhood, and therefore choosing lucidly and clearly to serve others, to withhold judgment or control over others, and to practice loving the self, accepting the self, and allowing the errors perceived within the self to be self-forgiven. As one forgives oneself, one then is able to forgive all. As the negative greeting is seen, then it is visualized and made materially real within the metaphysical world of thought as a creature of the night, a mythical creature which then is lovingly absorbed, accepted, and forgiven. The forgiven selfishness becomes harmless. This alone is enough to dissuade most negative third density entities who are wishing to control others, for most are not particularly skillful. Being accepted is to a negatively oriented entity who gains power by causing fear, anger, hatred, disgust, and other negative reactions of emotion. When this entity's selfhood is seen for its blackness, yet lovingly, compassionately accepted, absorbed into a strong goodness of self and forgiven, the negative entity experiences loss of all power and chooses to attempt to control others who will be satisfactorily afraid and terrorized by such, in the case of the very few who have the energy and endurance to pursue the path of control over others to the point where they are able to directly contact metaphysical sources of negativity. The situation, while no less solvable, is not as easily and simple to deal with from the standpoint of the one greeted. Again, in the unthinking person of third density, the response to perceived attack is counterattack. It takes a good deal of wisdom to be able to calmly and objectively gaze upon the face of metaphysical malevolence for those who have contacted those metaphysical sources which are of fourth density have garnered to themselves two things. One is a third density personality within incarnation of sureness and confidence. There is in such entity a true blackness of spirit, a honed hatred which sees no shadows. The positive path is full of shadows, of questions and doubts, of continual learning and balance. The choice for positivity is not the choice for simplicity of early lessons. The choice for negativity is a choice for simplicity of early lessons. Thusly, an entity which is negative has an apparent advantage once it has progressed to a certain point of being absolutely sure of the self without the need for faith, whereas the positively polarized entity is still dealing with the endless and confusing shadows of the spiritual landscape, which is lit by the dim star of hope and the thin, delicate moonlight of faith. In this situation where there is not only the living incarnate negative entity who greets one, but also the spirit of higher density cooperating in its peculiar manner in this negatively oriented entity, the positive path must be seen to be a place of hope and faith, which are accepted without proof. The positive pilgrim takes into the heart a strong desire to leap foolishly into the abyss of the unknown, unprotected by certainty, facing in midair the seeming destruction of personal safety, clinging to nothing but a faith that all is well and that there is nothing to fear. Many are the loving and positively oriented souls who yet are not able to do this. When such entities are greeted by these relatively powerful negative sources, the most, we search this instrument's mind for the appropriate word. Practical solution is to find one among your people which is positive in nature and is steeped in rituals of positivity, which include in their language the seeking of the greeting of fourth density or higher positive metaphysical entities. Such people are the so-called priests of various of your religious belief systems, which believe in the war betwixt good and evil. This war is fought by fourth density negative entities and fourth density positive entities, which still believe that a battle is appropriate. Before we leave this topic, we would focus once more upon the fertile land of spiritual choice, the dark world within. Each of you, gaze within. Do you feel magical? Do you feel powerful? If the answer comes too easily, it is likely that there is that within you which would choose the easy way towards power. That is the path of negativity, for each step upon the negative path seems from within to be positive. One wishes power so that one may help people. The way to help people is to give advice, give teaching, make sure that all is well by controlling various people and circumstances. All these things feel natural and good. Most beginning negative entities have no idea that they are embarking upon the path of negativity. Contrasting with this is the positive path, where power is accrued by being weakest. Greatness is achieved by being the servant of others, where advice and teachings are given only when offered. How many among your religious systems, caught up in the fervor of rightness and righteousness, judge, condemn, and control many for their own good? How few there are in your belief systems of religion who doctrine and dogma and seek to serve each entity according to its request when it can, and offering only benediction, forgiveness, and acceptance when it cannot. Yet, to those few who know themselves well enough not to judge, not to control others, but to work on the self, to those few come strength, magical power, and illumination of incandescent light, which shoots through the darkness of metaphysical field like lightning. The world, as this instrument would say, cannot see that lightning. Only each individual pilgrim upon the positive path who moves into a life in faith, a life without fear, may be illumined and moves through one. It does not stay with one, and such entities are channels of joy and peace. Whether the greeting of negative entities seems or seems not to succeed, such entities are forever safe in spirit. We are those of the positive path. We are also dusty pilgrims who have searched long in the shadows of hope and faith. We do not expect third density entities to be without fear. We simply ask entities who wish to live in faith not be afraid of their fear, not to be ruled by their fear, but to accept this fear, to love this fear as part of the universal self, and move on, leaping foolishly into the next step in blindness and faith. May each of you find each step to be one which is offered to the Infinite One as a gift, a testimony of love. For if the Creator is love, then the choice of fearlessness is always correct. We encourage each to be patient, forgiving, accepting, and slow with each fear that keeps it from progressing. Take time to work through the balancing of that fear. Overcome it never, but take it within the self. Love it, accept it, and gently, strand by strand, part the curtain that keeps the self from progressing fearlessly. This is slow work, but it moves one ever towards the truth, the good, and the beautiful. In another channeling done in April of 1989, with Carla channeling, the group asks, the question this evening has to do with the issues that exist between the Orion, or the so-called renegade UFO type of entities, and the Confederation entities, both of which seem to be in contact with the population of our planet. What are the issues between them, and how does our planet fit into the scheme of things and to the scheme of issues between the Orion and the Confederation entities? Quo says, we of the Confederation of Planets, in the service of the Infinite Creator, are those who wait for the call, for we are those upon the path of service to others. And where there is no call for service, it is not within the bounds of our free will to offer it. Therefore, we rejoice at this opportunity to share our opinions with you through this instrument, although we do wish you to remember to discriminate carefully in all that you may hear. Thus, we are, as you, pilgrims upon a very, very long and rewarding road, the road that seeks the mystery, the road that is the mystery of the one infinite Creator. You are all energy. That which you see as form and manifestation is instead a higher organization of energy fields. This will be helpful to remember as we speak with you about your question of the Confederation of Planets in the service of the Infinite Creator and its possible differences from the so-called Orion or Orionist group. There is an energy that radiates outward, blessing, shining, warming. The sun that you experience is a good example of such radiance. This is the radiance of unity, and in its promise lie the bloom of many kinds of qualities that may be considered positive and radiant: love, peace, unity, consolation, hope, and joy. There is another sort of energy which may be worked upon to empower it, and that is the magnetic or attractive energy, in which the entity creates the self as the creator and controls the creation about it, as would a king, his kingdom. These two energies manifest in many, many different ways. They are two sides of the same coin of the infinite intelligence that created all of the densities of space and time, through which in this creation we shall move. The trip may be longer for some than for others because the basic choice that this particular density asks the seeker to make is the choice of which density to use in order to further understand the mystery of the one infinite creator, the one original thought or logos that created all that there is. This choice may seem a simple one to make when gazed at theoretically. However, this particular illusion is designed to confuse and befuddle and trap, fool and mystify any and all attempts to make black and white out of the warp and woof of speckled gray that is this illusion. Thus, this choice must be made with the only real evidence pointing in the direction of personal power, as more effective than the radiant path of acting as the servant of all, shining upon all freely, spontaneously, and generously. Therefore, the person who has not thought deeply upon these matters moves through his life doing one good turn for a neighbor and then cutting another off in traffic, feeling murderous toward a fellow worker, and then noticing how beautiful is the sky at sunset upon the return home. The net result, dead zero. The changes in consciousness have moved back and forth in the gravity well of indifference. Now let us describe these paths from this point of choice until the point at which they move together again in the density beyond your own. That is the sixth. The positive polarity in fourth density is learning how to love completely, manifesting that love by creating a social entity of itself. That is a single group memory. Thus we call ourselves quo to you. I myself, who am speaking to you, am an individual within that population which has chosen to serve at this time in this manner. However, I have access to the experiences, ideas, and thoughts of all of those who work with me at this time. This is the work of positive fourth density. It is work that is not as difficult as the work you do now, with the heavier illusion, for we can remember that which you cannot. We remember the long, long line of choices that has brought us to the point at which we now find ourselves. This is in fourth density. Therefore, although there are many disharmonies, the disharmonies are understood. It is more possible by far to communicate and disregard differences in culture, sex, and race. Full concept communication or telepathy is most often used in this density, thus eliminating the need for comparison of symbols, which because of different racial archetypal minds can never be translated from one culture to another. There are those of us who in this fourth density turn back toward the third to offer themselves as teachers. There are those of the fifth or wisdom density that do the same, and we are one of those groups within the Confederation. There are very few sixth density entities which still attempt to communicate, for much happens within the sixth density, you see. The fourth density is a density of love or understanding. All the lessons that you are learning now have to do with how to love the unlovable, how to accept the unacceptable, how to remain radiant through all of the negative seeming experiences of the illusion, how to refrain from armoring the self. These are very, very difficult problems to deal with in your heavy illusion. Therefore, there are those of us in the love density and in the wisdom density which turn back to aid as teacher. But in the sixth density, wisdom and love must be combined, and it is wisdom's final conclusion that we are all one. This creates within the negatively oriented entity the terrible, tragic, unbelievable knowledge that it can go no further in the seeking for the one creator, unless it sees all others as the self. It can no longer manipulate others and fool itself that it is being otherwise all compassionate. This is a great crisis for those upon the negative path. For those upon the negative path in fourth density, create the social memory complex in a very rigid pecking order. Thoughts are shielded whenever possible, and no one is fully trusted. For personal power remains that which is sought in order to use the Creator's light, and much learning is available to those willing to think only of the self at all times. In our opinion, the positive path is much to be preferred. The other is, however, a viable, though somewhat more difficult and certainly longer path. In fifth density, the negative entity remains very much by itself, learning from its teachers and remaining completely solitary. It is in the sixth density that the negative entity must come face to face with this terrible difficulty, for the sixth density is the density of unity, and in this density those who have worked so hard to develop the negative polarity must, as quickly as a magnet could switch from south to north, move to positive polarity of the equal strength. This is a supreme act of will and is the unification of the children of the Creator. You may consider all of yourselves as those involved in the polarity betwixt the positive or radiant path and the negative or magnetic path. Now in the fourth density, there are many who are on the negative path who move into this density during windows of opportunity, which are allowed by the one infinite Creator under the premise that one with free will shall make a choice far more powerful than one with only partial information. Therefore, you may hear perhaps even a majority of negatively directed information pass through your hearing apparatus. This is not an indication of the Creator's opinions. This is the stuff of an illusion made of energy. You are to make a choice in a seemingly negative atmosphere to be radiant and positive and loving, to offer the self as servant for all, to humble the self and surrender to their self within. And in this you have to help. You have us who have been called angels to you. There are those upon the inner planes that have refused to go on, although finished with third density work, concerned that so many sit at this time upon the fence, unwilling or unable to bring themselves to the final cornerstone decision. Yes, my life will be service to others in the name of the infinite Creator, in the name of the mystery that I shall seek imperishably. We hope that each that is in incarnation at this time will realize the opportunity of free choice within such a heavy chemical illusion. It shall make a far deeper etching upon the picture, shall we say, of the self. It shall delineate more biases of polarity in incarnation than can ever happen outside of incarnation, when all is known and choices are obvious. Those upon the positive side, seeing that the negative entities attempt conquest at this time upon planet Earth, do in thought battle what one may fancifully call the forces of darkness. However, that Armageddon, shall we say, has been raging for 200 of your years already upon the spirit plane, and seems to be that which has no probability either way, for the good winning loses its polarity and must fall back to regroup, at which time the negative moves forward to take light. The battle is a delusion of fourth density, which fourth density entities learn for themselves the wisdom or folly of. However, you are more than pawns in this game. These entities are not more powerful than you, not in the metaphysical sense. That is, perhaps they might, in some negative manner, cause the entity to cease living, cause the discomfort or pain, the embarrassment, or the humiliation, or the fright. But they too are bound by the basic laws of free will and prey largely upon those whose minds are not complex in their thinking processes. You are the kings and queens and knights upon the board. You are the players in this game. The game, my friends, however, is too simple for most entities to grasp. To love, to smile, to have the light touch, to consider cautiously, to reserve judgment, to encourage each other, to care for those whom you know who may need it. These are simple things, yet each act offered in humility increases your polarity in such as much power as does the more obvious power of the entity, who gains power by his charisma and his skillful manipulation of entities about him. All of those within the Confederation are not within one galaxy. All of those in the so-called Orion group are not within that galaxy. And all about you, you will find some positive and some negative entities, some positive and negative planets. This is part of the plan of the particular creation laid into place and moving as smoothly as the working of a clock. Please understand that both space and time are illusions, and that each of you is energy, a thought, or consciousness, if you will. Do not gaze at the phenomenon of negative and positive. Gaze within the self in silence and pray that your energy may be always radiant and never that which sucks like the vampire, the energy of those about you. When you need help, radiance is in accepting it, and in the one who gives it in giving it. There is no circumstance whatsoever in which one cannot be of service by the cheery smile, the light touch, the gentle word, and the listening ear. We are pilgrims, and in talking with each other do we encourage each other to move onward and seek the Father's house. O prodigal daughters and sons, whatever your condition, your Father awaits you, and all of us with rejoicing, and we are all hungry for home. Yet let us vow in whatever place we may be to pay attention, to see and observe and perceive that which our catalyst is attempting to give us in the way of lessons about love. Do not lose any opportunity to ask yourself, in difficult circumstances, where is the loving thing to do? Where is the love here? Yes, negative and positivity exist, and it seems prudent to be both positive and negative entities, to form alliances in the positive sense so that we may share in one higher self, which is a common memory of us all. In the negative sense, there are various reasons shifting and restless for combination. They all have to do with conquest. About those things which are political, we wish to remain silent, simply reminding each that phenomena are manifesting of energy. The energy may be understood very simply. Gaze at any phenomenon and ask yourself, is it radiant and giving and loving and unifying, or is it frightening and painful and difficult to bear? Are you requested, or are you told and commanded? Judge for yourself the polarity of entities and situations, and know that armies will clash until entities tire of that game. The mystery of why the Creator chose to offer us these challenges and these ways of learning remains unknown to us. It is as well to accept for now that such is the case, and to move always upon the positive path, thinking of others more than you do the self, giving more than you receive, understanding more than you understood, being content to love. You are loved most passionately and imperishably as the imperishable and unique soul that you are. The Creator is fascinated with you and wishes to know the tapestry of your feelings and thoughts and ideas and intentions. Offer to the Creator a passionate life, a life filled with caring and giving and loving and sharing. Let the colors be true and rich, and let yourself have those periods which are the desert times, for those colors too must be in a truly beautiful painting or tapestry. Know as you go through the dark times of all the life that awaits to burst forth through the soil at the first drenching of blessed rains, and know that you shall as a soul receive that rain and walk once again in the lush oasis of joy. Someone asks, those of like vibration who are going for the mind of the one versus those of the like vibration who are moving towards material, how do their vibrations differ in feeling and aura and sound? How do we recognize those who are different vibrations here on this planet? I am Quo, and as we understand your query, those of your population, that is of the third density, would be for the most part unable to recognize the vibration of the entities of densities beyond their own, whether the entities were of the positive or negative orientation, unless these entities chose to make certain portions of their being known to those of your population. However, there are many among your peoples that have awakened the abilities of the initiate and have become somewhat sensitized in a manner which would allow them to perceive with finer tuning, shall we say, some of the qualities and entities of advanced densities. For the most part, the aura of the negatively oriented entity will have in his field a predominance of colors of the lower energy centers, those being the red, the orange, and the yellow. The positively oriented entity, on the other hand, will exhibit the colorations of the higher energy centers, beginning with the heart and the green, the blue, and the indigo. The entities of the negative orientation will, when making their presence known to an entity of your third density, exhibit the feeling of coldness and will set in motion a subtle feeling of agitation or fear. The positively oriented entity will seek to engender only those feelings of brotherhood, of inspiring those entities that they touch with any portion of their presence. In another question, they ask, how do we know if we are walk-ins, interbreds, hybrids, or we have been tagged? Must this information be protected from us? Is there a way to discern? Now, I will try to do an episode about walk-ins, so I'm very interested in this concept, the idea that an entity can walk in, take over your personality. Drunvalo Melchizedek claims to be a walk-in. Abraham Lincoln is called a walk-in in the Law of One. So Quo says, I am Quo, and I am aware of your query, my brother. For a general response to this query that does not risk the infringement upon the free will of those who seek the mystery of their own being, we must suggest that one look within one's own being within the state of meditation or of prayer, and for those who are accomplished at working with their dreams within the sleeping state, there might be sought information in those areas that is not readily accessible to the conscious mind. The part which desires with great intensity to know the nature of its own being and the purpose of its being shall with dogged persistence continue to seek within the meditative or prayerful state this information which the subconscious mind contains in full, and which it will release in symbolic form to the conscious mind in order that the conscious mind might be informed in the manner by which it has sought information. This is the means by which one knocks upon the inner door, that it might be opened and there might be an exchange of information and experience between the conscious and unconscious minds. The masks, shall we say, that each entity wears within an incarnation are placed as they are by the entity and its free will choices prior to each incarnational experience, in order that certain potentials might be offered for learning certain lessons and offering services as a result of these experiences. Thus, each entity has the mystery that surrounds it, that offers to it the constant opportunity to penetrate the veil of forgetting, as it is called, in order that a glimpse of that which lies beyond shall inspire the seeker to continue on this journey, finding a glimmer of light here, then there, then here, then there, and putting together these pieces of illumination, might begin to understand the nature of its own being and its connection to all the creation about it. They ask, the beings who come in from the Confederation, do they contact and take people for experimentation only with their permission, or do they feel that they have a higher ethical imperative which overrides those of us of the lower dimensions? Quo says, it is the desire of each entity and group of entities that comprise the Confederation of Planets in the service of the one infinite Creator to offer those services to the population of your planetary sphere that are requested, as long as these services do not infringe upon the free will of those requesting the service. Thus, the interaction between those of the Confederation and your planetary population is one which is carefully guarded for the benefit of the population of your planet. For if there is interaction that is too, shall we say, open or blatant, and which gives answers too easily, the student will not benefit from the interaction. Though it shall know the answers to the, shall we say, test of life, it shall not be able to move upon its own direction without the insistence of those who are more informed. This is not a situation which is desirable for the entities on your planetary sphere or of those of the Confederation of Planets. Thus, the positively oriented contact will be one which is most subtle in most cases. There are, of course, anomalistic situations in which these general guidelines may not apply. However, there is always the great desire to ensure the exercise of free will by those of your population, so that there is no infringement of this free will and no interaction that causes undue fear. If this can be avoided at all, thus, most of the contacts that occur between the Confederation of Planets and those of your population are contacts which occur upon the, shall we say, inner planes, or the astral level of experience which is accessible through the sleep and dreaming process, or the meditative state. There are few contacts of a positively oriented nature that occur in the face-to-face counter, as we find you have called it. In another question they ask, those who are renegades, do they have different ethical imperatives that allows them to override the ethics and values of those of the third dimension? That is, do they work against our will without us having a say? Quo says, I am Quo and I'm aware of your query. Those of the negatively oriented polarity have chosen the path that is magnetic or absorbent in nature, shall we say, that of light, of power, of energy, or of fruitfulness, of any nature which is about such an entity shall be controlled, shall we say, by that entity in order that its own power might be enhanced. Thus, the entities of the negative orientation have chosen to travel a path in which the subjugation of the will of others is a natural part of that path, enabling those who gain power over others to exercise that power in a manner which does indeed infringe upon the free will of those who are brought under the control of the upper, shall we say, echelons or ranks of this polarization. The interaction betwixt these entities and the population of your planet has, as one of the cornerstones, the engendering of the emotion of fear, in order that the population of your planet might look with a feeling of fear and separation at the entities that comprise your population, and at the concept of contact with extraterrestrial beings in general. The concept of fear that can be utilized to divide, shall we say, the desire of your peoples to travel the path of seeking the light, if that path can be shown to be strewn with difficulties and the unknown and fear-filled quality of beings that populate it. Thus, with the ignorance that is engendered by such fear and separation, can the population of a peoples be controlled and utilized as what you might call the slaves that produce endlessly that which is desired by the master. And in another question they ask, those who seek the light, is there a way we can protect ourselves from those who seek the darkness? I am quo and am aware of your query, my brother. We are most grateful that you have queried in this regard, for there is indeed the means by which any seeker of light might provide itself with a protection from such influence. Though it seems quite a foolish thing to do, the means is to enter within one's own heart, within the state of meditation or prayer, and to find as much heartfelt love as one can generate and offer it to those who would wish one less than well, and to bathe these entities in this love and in that light, and to offer to them that unconditional love from the heart, which is so sweet and delicate to those of the positive polarity, but which has the opposite effect upon those of the negative polarity. However, we must remind each that it is necessary that the intention for such a projection be not to resist or to cause the entities of negative polarity any discomfort at all, but to simply offer the heartfelt love to such entities, and then to bathe the self in the armor of love and light, and to offer this love as often as is necessary in order that the protection and wall of light be constructed about the entity in a pure and heartfelt manner. Thus, the positive and negative poles offer a natural boundary, shall we say, or resistance, each to the other, for a certain portion of time and experience, before the unification of these polarities is accomplished within the sixth density illusion, as we spoke previously. There is no greater healing power than that of true heartfelt compassion without condition, and offered as a prayer to the one Creator which exists within one creation, and which responds to the heartfelt plea of assistance. And in another channeling in October of 2018, somebody asked a pretty interesting question about the service to self and service to others distinctions, asking, "It's my understanding that the service to others path and self-care are not mutually exclusive, and that we can be positive beings while at the same time taking care of ourselves, such as taking care of our health, taking care of our spaces, making sure we have time to ourselves, and going out of our way to enjoy life. My question has to do where this falls in the system of polarity. I imagine that doing these things out of an intention to better ourselves in order to serve better would be positively polarizing. But what if we're doing these things just for the sake of ourselves? If we just want to be healthy, if we want to enjoy ourselves and enjoy life, not necessarily with the ultimate intention of serving others through that means, is that serving ourselves, or where does this fall on the spectrum of polarity?" Quo says, "I am Quo and am aware of your query. This is indeed a salient query for the times in which you find yourselves experiencing much catalyst of a seeming divisive nature. and yet providing opportunities for those who wish to serve to do so, as those which ameliorate or attempt to ameliorate the divisions that now persist upon your planet. The difficulty within the planetary consciousness at this time is that many entities have not chosen either the positive or the negative polarity to pursue in their life path. And the query you raise is one in which is within the boundary of the, shall we say, non-polarizing gravity well of indifference, as those of Ra have called it. Many there are which have moved into the level of attempting to be conscious in their own private experience, so that the manner of viewing the self is that which attempts to care for each portion of the mind-body-spirit complex. However, most of the attention is given in these instances which you mention to the body and mind, attempting to become informed as to the best means of achieving the most balance of mind and health of body, with the intention extending the lifespan, shall we say, to enjoy the pleasures of life, the qualities of existence that in your particular country may be described as the American dream, to have those accomplished of education, the result in successful employment, the results in emolument to pay for houses and cars, and those accoutrements that aid in the convenience of the daily round of activities and style of life. This type of self-consciousness is neither positive nor negative, as we mentioned, for it is the intention to provide the basic necessities for the life experience that moves no further than the intellectual apprehension of what makes the life more agreeable. At some point, this type of energy and intention has an opportunity to express itself in service to others. For those great majority of entities that are now incarnate upon your planet, due to the seniority system of incarnations that allocate the incarnative opportunity to grow in a spiritual sense to those most likely to be able to do so, so that each entity now incarnate in this positive sense has programmed pre-incarnatively the opportunity to be of service to others at a certain point within the incarnative pattern. There will be catalyst offered that will invite the choice to be of service to others. The catalyst is of a great variety of potential means of expression, for each entity is quite unique and will choose that which is in harmony with its own beingness and intentions in balancing the previous incarnations and their choices in the upcoming incarnation. It is hoped by each entity, then, in the positive sense that this opportunity to serve others will become that which is paramount within the experience. This choice of service to others, then, at that point, marks the beginning of the opening of the green ray energy center, and the conscious apprehension of the reason for the incarnation and the ability to see through the more illusory, the entity seeing beyond the health of the self, seeing beyond the comfort of the self, seeing beyond the caring for the family and looking to the expression of the service to others orientation in a conscious fashion. Therefore, the intention becomes altered to the degree that the self then looks beyond its own boundary to other selves and finds a means by which service may be offered that will operate to polarize the consciousness in the sense of this service to others opportunity. Question. For clarification, I think I'm understanding that there's an entity who's generally polarizing positively, and their focus for most of the part is upon serving others. And they maybe go out of their way to do something to enjoy themselves just for the sake of enjoying themselves, and not for the sake of serving others. So long as it's not at the expense of another self, that activity is not necessarily positively polarizing, but it's not detrimental to the entity's positive polarity in itself. Is that true? Ko says, I am Ko and am aware of your query. This is true, for it is the intention that is the most important ingredient in such choices. The intention in the case which you describe is not that which is desiring to be of service to others, or of service to self by controlling others and separating from others, but is that which contains no polarizing possibility. For it is in the, shall we say, gravity well of indifference, indifferent to the polarization process, and ignorance, shall we say, of that process's existence and opportunity to be utilized for an entity. And in another question, on a different topic, I would like to ask about the idea that the information that you share and that we provide on the internet generally falls within the realm of conspiracy. People typically find it through a means of researching conspiracy theories, and there's a path to finding the law of one and other channeled material by first discovering conspiracy and then finding the channeled material. And sometimes people sort of fall away from the conspiracy aspect. But I wanted to ask what the role of conspiracy theories and that path of first finding conspiracy and then finding the spiritual information. What is the dynamic and what is the proper role of the conspiracy theories are in heart of the spiritual evolution? Quo says the so-called conspiracy theories are, for many entities, as you have mentioned, a beginning movement away from the generally accepted explanation of the nature of reality, for that which is hidden is known within the inner being to be of a spiritual nature, ultimately for each individual. Thus, this subconscious knowing of the need to seek that which is hidden within the self oftentimes begins with seeking that which is hidden in the outer reality, there being an inner sense that the hidden quality is of importance to the individual mind-body-spirit complex. However, when this path of seeking to know more about the hidden qualities of the so-called planetary game or conspiracy theories as to how this game is played is pursued long enough by an entity which is enough interested in riddles and puzzles to move beyond that which is of the conspiracy nature, eventually such an entity discovers that it does not feel fulfilled in that inner sense of craving fulfillment by knowing more and more of the conspiracy scenario. Who did what to whom and why? When this sense of lack of fulfillment becomes strong enough, such an entity becomes more aware that there is something lacking within this hidden story. There is something there that might point the attention and consciousness and the expenditures of energy inward to this conspiracy buff, shall we say, for it is discovered that this sense of craving is stronger than the desire to know something that was hidden, and therefore feel more informed than the average consumer of information within your culture. The desire to move beyond being controlled by forces that are unseen and who have supposedly contact with entities of an extraterrestrial nature, perhaps, who are behind their machinations, causes the seeker of truth to be born in a fashion within the conscious mind and the sensitive heart of the entity who has heretofore decided that there was something more to the illusion than normally experienced, and now has decided that there is more to the illusion than conspiracies and Illuminati and Malta and so forth. Thus the seeker may be born as a portion of the path of seeking begins within that investigation into the planetary game. When the seeker then discovers the spiritual journey, then all seems to fall into place as the pieces of the puzzle are more able to be placed in the proper location within the mind-body-spirit complex of the newborn seeker of love and light. Thus, within this realm of secrecy may be sown seeds of infinity, and the seeker of truth moves forward. They then ask, the realm of conspiracy theories is vast, and some of the popular conspiracy theories, if they are true, could be at the root of all suffering on the planet. So some positive seekers, after finding the spiritual heart of evolution, still care about the nature of these conspiracies and want to raise awareness. But doing so can sometimes induce fear and create distortion. It's my understanding that that's why the Confederation tends not to wish to speak too directly about these conspiracy theories. Are there any suggestions that the Confederation has for those seekers who do care about these particular conspiracies and want to raise awareness but not create distortion and fear? Quo says, I am Quo and I am aware of your query. Again, we move back to the concept of intention. Whatever action an entity undertakes with the intention of being of service to others is that action that begins to polarize the consciousness in the positive sense. Many seekers, in the best of intentions, tend at times to move into areas of transient information and experience. It is difficult to move clearly and concisely within the realm of illusion in which you now find yourselves, whether there is a conspiracy afoot or not. Thus, the Confederation of Planets, in the service of the One Creator, feels that it is important for entities to look first to the intention of service to others, and secondarily to look to the amelioration of the suffering that is caused by the so-called hidden hands and hidden motives and entities. When there is means of avoiding the difficulty of the fear being introduced, it is most necessary to them to step back from the movement into that realm of experience. The seekers of truth who wish to serve those who are in need of the basic ingredients of their life experience, the ability to choose their path, the ability to live without fear, the ability to feed and clothe the family, the ability to consider the nature of reality in which they move, the ability to seek a greater reality within all, these are the areas in which entities may indeed serve others, with the intention to give assistance to those who require it and request it. Thus, the intention is all. And in a final question, they ask, what you resist persists. So it's sort of like we hesitate, confrontation with those that are in fear, out of fear, that will perpetuate the fear-based intention. How do we act as effective participatory individuals by serving others most effectively and still avoid the resistance and perpetuate persistence? Quo explains the way that we of the Confederation of Planets in the service of the one infinite creator have always suggested that the spiritual seeker pursue the path of service to others is to attempt to exemplify those qualities of that path, which are fundamentally the love of the creator within all beings, sharing the light of this creator with all with whom each entity comes in contact on a daily basis, and attempting to see the unity of all creation before one, whether it seems an illusory separation of entities pursuing various means of control and manipulation of others, or seeming to give that which is needed to others when it is needed. Thus, our suggestion to each serious seeker of truth is to become that which you seek in the actions of your daily round of activities. Attempt to love with a whole heart when you're confused as to the nature of the experience confronting you. Attempt to share the light that you know as the creator within you. See the unity of all beings. Seek the light and praise the one creator in all. This, of course, will be translated by each seeker in a unique fashion, for there is no one way that works for each seeker. But if you have within your heart and within your mind the desire to be of service to others, then it will be a natural thing to resist not evil, for it perpetuates, as you say, that quality. If you fight or attempt to control that which is done to others, even out of the best of intentions, you are perpetuating that which you seek to eradicate. For that is the game of negative polarity, to control, to resist, to manipulate for the benefit of the few. The seeker of truth, however, does not recognize any division of a true nature in any being. That which is seen as evil or negative is the darker side of unity. At some point, all negatively oriented entities will, of their own free will, choice, desire to seek the light, in the same sense as the positive entities do. For at some point within the evolutionary process, it is not possible to move forward without seeing all the same as the self. In your illusion in this third density experience, it seems that there are positive and negative entities that are so vastly separated from each other, there could be no possible union at any time. This is another illusion, my sister. See then the Creator in all, for the Creator has made all that there is. There is nothing but the Creator. Look above and beyond that which seems negative and divisive, for it is an illusion, and at some point it shall be ameliorated and rectified. There will be once again the unity of all creation, as each individual within the infinite creation exercises its free will to move back into unity with the one infinite Creator, bringing all its infinite choices to the one Creator as means by which it may know itself more fully, more intensely, and with greater variety. All is one, my sister. There is no other truth. At this time, we thank each for calling our presence today in your circle of seeking. We are honored to have been able to join you. We are inspired by you in your seeking within this dense and heavy illusion which seems to cloud every perception and make it difficult to see where the path might be. Move forward in love and light in all times. That is your truth. That is your heart. That is your destiny. We are those of Quo. We leave you now in that love and in that light. Adonai Vasu Boragis. So we have some amazing channelings, some amazing information that is given in these channelings to differentiate the service to self path from the service to others path. You don't have to feel guilty if you're doing stuff for the enjoyment of yourself. That does not mean it's service to self. As explained here, you can do things for yourself for your own enjoyment. It doesn't mean that you're being selfish. And in this process of seeking out to improve your life or to improve your family or whatever your situation to survive, you end up expressing some unique thing that you can be of service to others. In my own case, this particular channel was one thing that came about through just a seeking in the same way. So I know that everybody out there has some unique, beautiful way where you can help others in a massive way, and it's different for everybody. This also gives us some interesting information about walk-ins, which I find interesting. Some of that answer was a cop-out. I'd still like to know. I mean, I have communications with my higher self, and well, is that a walk-in? I don't know. How do you differentiate between a walk-in and some other channeled being? So I find that interesting. And the very first question, the talk of the riots and how to respond to that mentally, was so spot on to what we are experiencing now. And the questions of what do we do? How do we think about this? What's the right thing to do? There's some great answers in that really explain what we're going through in this third density, the heavy chaotic energy that we're dealing with. So there's a lot to take in this, and I could go through an analysis for another hour, but that's a good place to stop. I think that we got a lot of really powerful information. For a lot of people, I've had questions where they just don't understand. Is this service to self? What does it mean? And we will continue to ask those questions as we do this. But I am in service to others, and I am very happy about it. It's one of the best decisions that I've ever made, and I ask you to join me, because that's what this planet is. It's a positive-oriented service to others planet, and we together can awaken those people that are here for that reason, that are here to help others. Because it's my belief that majority of this planet are those people. We might have had terrible incarnations in the past. We've been going in a spiritual seeking incarnatively for a very long time. But now is the time when we embrace this path of helping others. It's not difficult. Everybody makes this out to be so complicated. Oh, it's so tough. But the truth is, it's only 51% service to others to move to the fourth density. That just means you have to care about others just a little bit more than you care about yourself. That may seem hard for many of you. I understand. You don't want to worry about anybody else. You have a lot of stuff going on in your own life. So that's why I believe in things that will create prosperity and love, because those are things you're going through before you can express your own ways to help other people. And in my own case, I've found if somebody's worried about their next paycheck, the last thing they're thinking about is being of service to others. Now, those few that end up serving others in predicaments like that when they're struggling with poverty are amazing to me, but it's very rare. So I think it's important that you get your own security, you get an understanding of how you create your reality. And as you become more aware of your own purpose and who you are and come into contact with your higher self, then you're going to have these amazing skills that you have available to yourself to help others. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.